I was 33 years old, standing in my own kitchen in Lakewood, Colorado, holding a dish towel so tight my knuckles had gone white, and I still hadn't learned how to defend myself against Diane, my mother-in-law. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary, forgettable, the kind of afternoon where nothing is supposed to happen. Ryan, my husband, had texted me that morning saying he wouldn't be home until 7. Client meeting ran late, he said. So when Diane's silver SUV pulled into our driveway at 4 o'clock, unannounced as always, I told myself it would just be an hour. Maybe less. It was never less. She let herself in with the spare key Ryan had given her, the one I'd asked him more than once gently to take back. She walked straight past me into the kitchen and set her purse down like she owned the counter it landed on. "You're still using this dish set?" she asked, not looking at me. "I thought I told Ryan I'd buy you a real one." That was how it always started. Small. A comment about the dishes. The way I folded towels. The fact that I worked from home doing freelance bookkeeping instead of, in her words, a real career. For years of marriage, and I had learned to let those comments slide off me like rain off a window. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself Ryan loved me, and that was the only opinion that counted. But that Tuesday, something in her had sharpened. "I don't know why he married someone who can't even keep this house looking presentable," she said, running a finger along the windowsill, checking it for dust. "I raised him better than this. I raised him to want more." I didn't answer. I never answered. Answering only made it last longer. "You know," she continued, turning to face me now, her voice dropping into something colder, "I used to think you'd grow into being his wife, into being someone worth the life he's given you. But some people just don't have it in them. You came from nothing, and it shows." My throat tightened. I set the dish towel down because my hands had started to shake, and I didn't want her to see that. I opened my mouth, not to fight back, just to ask her to stop when I heard it. The front door. Keys hitting the entryway table the way they always did, that familiar metallic clatter I'd know anywhere. Footsteps stopping cold in the hallway. Diane heard it too. Her face didn't move, but her eyes flicked toward the doorway, and for the first time in 4 years, I watched real panic cross her face. Ryan was standing there, briefcase still in his hand. He hadn't said a word. I don't know how long he'd been standing in that hallway, or how much he'd heard, but from the look on his face, frozen somewhere between disbelief and something I'd never seen in him before, I understood one terrible thing. He had heard enough. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The kitchen clock on the wall was the only sound, ticking through a silence so heavy it felt like it might crack the floor beneath us. And then Ryan finally said my name. "Claire." Just that. Quiet. Like he was trying to make sure I was really standing there, that this was really happening. He set his briefcase down slowly, like he needed a second to figure out what his hands were supposed to do. Then he looked at his mother. "How long?" he asked her. "Have you been talking to my wife like that?" Diane opened her mouth, already reaching for the explanation she'd used 100 times before. "Ryan, I was just..." "How long, Mom?" I watched something in her collapse. Not all at once, but enough. Ryan turned to me then, and his eyes were different. Not angry at me, not embarrassed, just wide open in a way I hadn't seen since our wedding day. "Claire, has she talked to you like this before?" I could have lied. I'd been lying by staying quiet for 4 years. But I was tired, and the truth just came out of me on its own. "Almost every time she comes over," I said. "I never told you because I didn't want you to have to choose between us. I love how much you love your mom. I didn't want to be the reason that changed." Ryan's jaw tightened, and I watched 4 years' worth of small moments rearrange themselves behind his eyes. The times I'd suddenly gone quiet after family dinners, the holidays I'd found reasons to skip, the way I always volunteered to do dishes alone in the kitchen. He'd noticed all of it. He just hadn't understood what it meant. Now he did. He turned back to his mother. "You don't get to talk to her like that. Not in her own home. Not ever again." "I only wanted what's best for you," Diane said, and for the first time her voice cracked. "What's best for me," Ryan said, "is a wife who's had to carry this alone because she loved me too much to make me choose. That's not protecting me, Mom. That's hurting the person I chose to spend my life with." Diane left that afternoon without finishing her sentence. The house felt strange in the quiet after the door closed. Not peaceful exactly, but different. Lighter, somehow, like something that had been sitting on my chest for years had finally been set down. That night, Ryan sat beside me on the couch and asked me to tell him everything. Every comment. Every year. I did, and he listened without once interrupting, without once defending her. When I finished, he took my hand and said something I don't think I'll ever forget. "I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to be strong enough to handle this by yourself. It wasn't fixed overnight. Diane didn't become a different person in a week." But Ryan set boundaries that afternoon and held them. Visits only when there was respect, no more spare key, no more comments that got waved off as just how mom is. Slowly, over months, Diane started to soften, started to actually see me instead of the idea of me she decided on years earlier. I think about that Tuesday a lot. Not because it was the day my mother-in-law humiliated me, but because it was the day my husband finally saw the weight I'd been carrying quietly, and instead of looking away, he picked it up with me. Sometimes love isn't about never letting anyone hurt the people we care about. Sometimes it's about finally noticing when someone we love has been hurting in silence, and having the courage to stand beside them the moment we find out.